There's other teams out there who can overtake them.
No, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Here's why. Right, Counterpoints is back, and as usual, skip all the noise, we'll jump straight into the spiciest topic. And I think I've got one, even though normally a lot of our discussion is like rosters, style of play, what happened in a specific match, who's playing well. There's actually sort of like an outside of the server drama that I feel like is an interesting one to address, because I feel like everyone thinks they know the story on this one, but there's so many angles we can go with. So people remember, during the FURIA versus Falcons game, actually a big game for both teams at this point, even though it's not a playoff match, because they're both kind of teams that want to be in the same spot. They've even been rivals that second season last year, etc. If you look in this match, there was a moment where basically there was like three things all happened, which is also why I think this part I'm going to bring up didn't get much attention. So first of all, YEKINDAR hit his mouse, didn't he, on the desk, which funnily enough is also funny, because if people saw there was those markets like, will someone break some at that event, it's like, what's going on here? So, okay, he almost did that. Secondly, after he hit his mouse, this is the weirdest thing, he didn't actually break the mouse. Like, they claim he was ready to go again with the mouse in like 30 seconds. But there ended up being this massive tech pause, because when he hit his mouse, this is why it gets really suspicious, by the way, the second aspect of FURIA kicked in, which is Serato, like a fucking Roomba, just stood up and like went to the docking point, like, just stood up and left the room because apparently he needed to go to the toilet. Here's my problem already, Pimp. Well, what a coincidence that right when your teammate hits the mouse is when you need to get up and go to the toilet, because if people don't know, if you just got up during a fucking live match and went to the toilet, your team is 100% getting fined, probably punished, there'd be all sorts of shit could happen. Like, that could even be some like actual suspension issue or something in the tournament, because you're not allowed to do it. I can tell you a long time ago, when there was actually a world championship that Na'Vi won at an IEM, and Zeus, before the final or during the final, just literally ran off stage and went to the toilet and said he needed the toilet. Obviously it was fucking Zeus. If people don't know, he was a bit of an idiot as a person, and he actually got docked like 5% of his prize money. It's not mental. So the joke is he lost like thousands from doing that, because the logic of ESL was like, how are we supposed to run the fucking LAN if you're just exiting and going away for 15 minutes? So then there was a third part, and the third part didn't get as much attention. Most people would talk about the YEKINDAR mouse thing, or the why is Serato basically forcing a tech pause by going out. But then the third part that I thought was actually more subtle but worse is if you watched on camera when the tech pause happened. If people don't know, the tech pause is supposed to be purely because there's a technical issue. So there's actually a rule that even though people used to call it tech timeout, not tech pause, it isn't a timeout. Like, it's not a moment for you to all talk and go, hey, play a little bit off the balcony there, and actually let's get a smoke. If you do that, essentially you're getting the value of a real timeout. And there's a reason why in Counter-Strike we not only don't let the coaches talk all the time, but we have a limited number of timeouts like sports that you have to burn depending on what the time is. And in a big match like this, by the way, big rivals playing, it's a pretty big deal to get extra tech. And if people saw, it wasn't just that this happened, bro. It was bang on camera on the stream. On the stream, they have a camera angle, bro. That almost looks, Pimp, I'll get them to link it in the description of this. It almost looks like you had all the cameras, and this is the one you're trying to show that FURIA is cheating. Because when the tech pause happens, you just see Fallen, the fucking IGL who sat in the middle, turning, and he's just talking to people. Now, here's the problem. If people don't know, even if he's talking about YEKINDAR's mouse or Serato going to the toilet, that's not allowed either. The actual rule for real is you have to stay silent so that nothing can happen. Obvious reason why would be, what if, like, for example, Russian spoke in Russian and the admin doesn't know Russian? Or, you know, the problem is it's supposed to genuinely be that because you don't talk, you can get no extra value out of the tech pause. But as far as I can tell, Fallen did do it. I even saw Yanko called him out on Twitter. I even made an initial mistake, by the way, because I saw Yanko calling out. I was like, wait a minute, Yanko coached him. Wow, he's calling out his boy Fallen. No, I'm an idiot. He's calling out his boy Fallen, cheating against his boy Nico in Falcons. How did I miss that one? But whatever, they don't always immediately present. And my point is this, look, we'll go into it, but I want to start here. We can do any angle as an analyst, as someone who was a pro. What do you think about any part of that? We can get into any, obviously we're definitely going to go on the Fallen part. What do you think generally though? What are your thoughts about this incident, Prim?
Yeah, I was just like, as you're describing all of this, I was thinking to myself, what angle can you take? I think first and foremost, establish, the understanding for people at home as why it is, as you said, obviously you cannot speak to each other in a non-timeout in a tech issue for the reasons you just mentioned. Let's say a Russian-speaking team would speak to each other about the game or whatever that may be, where the admin have no theoretical chance of knowing what they're talking about. It's about competitive integrity of the game. So in terms of implementing that rule, in terms of having that rule and enforcing it online, I think that's very important that you stay true to that, because that's a lot of the conversations that's been around these online qualifiers, the online portions of Counter-Strike, that it's merely impossible to enforce that when a team is sitting at a boot camp and communicating through TeamSpeak. Sure, an admin can be on TeamSpeak during that online tournament, but people can just take off their headset and talk to each other, right? So when we're in a LAN environment, when that's, a very important part of the game, I definitely get why we should point it out if it's not being obliged to, and if there's been any cheating. I'll also say that I covered that specific game on the disc, and I was in the middle of preparing a round with the producer, so we're sitting in the green room, talking back and forth, and while these tech issues were happening, and while YEKINDAR smashed his mouse, I was in the middle of preparing a round that I wanted to show on the desk, so I actually didn't see it happen initially, and I just looked up on the screen, and said, okay, there's a tech timeout, and then I looked down, preparing a round, I look up again, and I asked my colleague what's going on, and they explained to me that YEKINDAR smashed his mouse, now there's a tech timeout. I don't think we really realized exactly what happened in the moment, as we were also busy preparing other things, so I only saw it first when I got home on Twitter, and when Janko had called it out, when Blasted came out and made an official statement, and then when Janko replied back and forth. So I didn't really have an initial take on it. It does look like, obviously he's talking to his teammates at the moment, and that's something I feel should be punished. That's not okay, and that's an angle of taking of it as well. So I think from a competitive integrity part, I very much understand why we have the rule. I very much firmly believe that we should enforce that rule. And then again, what's being said, what's not being said, it could be, and I know that from a professional perspective, for all I care and for all I know, in essence, Fallen could be cracking a joke, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like there's no, exactly, and that's the issue. We don't know. So if he came out and said, well, I was just telling a joke, I was just, what a tough game, whatever, that would add a bit of context to it, in terms of the degree of severity, but that's kind of where I want to take this, and I want to use a bit of a sports reference to it, actually. Because I follow cycling a lot, and I don't know if you do, right? But whenever there's a crash in cycling, or whenever there's an accident in cycling, and some of the riders gets dropped from the bunch, it's a written or unwritten rule, that you're technically not allowed to draft behind a team car, which is basically the bike rider, going behind a team car and then being dragged back to the peloton, by sitting behind the team car. Because obviously the drag in cycling is massive, so. For a rider to sit behind a team car, it means that he maybe has to produce 20 or 30% of the power.
You don't have the wind blowing in your face, basically. Right.
Exactly. It's like a massive advantage, right? Now, in cycling, it's kind of like a case-by-case scenario in the sense that if there's a crash, if there's an accident happening, if there's something unforeseen, it could be a rider crashing in front of you, which means that I'm crashing, then more often than not, the commissioners are allowing that rider to be dragged back by the car because there's not something actively the rider did himself, it's just pure unlock or whatever that may be. It could be a puncture as well. However, in this case, I feel like it's YEKINDAR initiating the pause by smashing his mouse. Personally, I don't give a fuck. I think it was Striker who made a pretty decent take on it as well. If a player smashes his mouse because he can't control his feelings, have a spare mouse ready. That's not an excuse for having a 5 to 10 minute break. Yeah. Right. As simple as it is. And as you said, the context in this scenario is that apparently he was ready to go after 30 seconds. Then there was Quesurado, et cetera, et cetera. But as a ground principle, if you smash your mouse, and that's what initiating the first tech timeout that then Quesurado takes advantage of because he has a sick leave or whatever that may be, I don't think that should be allowed. I think there should be a punishment for that in itself. You should be ready within the next 20 or 30 seconds. Have a spare mouse ready or whatever. If you're one of the types that desk slams, or if you can't control your emotions, basically. It could be that you break the desk, could be that you break your monitor, etc., etc. I think that's on you, basically. So in kind of the point I want to make here is that I don't think that there should be any help whatsoever from the blast admins. There should be any help whatsoever from the TO or anyone if what initiated the issue was YEKINDAR smashing his mouse. Same could be said for cycling. If I'm crashing because I can't control my bike, or I do something stupid, then I shouldn't be allowed to be dragged back to the peloton. That's a me issue. I did it to myself. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't something unintentional. It was me and my action who caused me to have a disadvantage. I think that should be, or at least that's the way I'm thinking about it in this rare case. Then again, I will say I haven't really. We just spoke about it before we started the show. I haven't dive deep into it, so I don't really have a strong opinion in regards to it. But I will say that if cheating, as per the word includes, if there has been tactical discussions, if there has been something going on in a game of that significance as well, we're talking elimination game in a very important moment of the game as well, I think there should be some sort of punishment, and it should be flagged, and it should be something that could be used as an example for future teams to deal with their behavior. And then I think as a side consequence, as I said, Striker on his takes, I very much agree with the take that if you break your mouse, or if you break your keyboard, if you break a monitor because you couldn't control your feelings or whatever that may be, should be a punishment. Shouldn't be my problem. Shouldn't be the opponent's problem, and it sure as hell shouldn't be the viewer's problem that is potentially delaying the game for 10 minutes because you smashed your mouse. So I think that's a great occasion to speak about that, and put some focus on it and iron out a clear rule set in regards to that, or a clear punishment system in regards to that if you're a TO, because nothing should delay the game, unless it's something unforeseen, because we have enough tech delays, we have enough technology going on in the game already. If a player is initiating by smashing his mouse, that's a player's problem, that's a team problem. The punishment should be on their side.
Yeah, there's a few different angles on here. So here's how I'll go with it first. Right, one problem I have goes like this. Even though I'm not, look, I say these disclaimers a million times. The stupidest people don't listen and the smart people listen, but they already understood anyway. So I get that I'm wasting my time, but I'll do it anyway for the sake of being legit. Right, obviously, in this scenario, I'm not saying YEKINDAR intentionally did this to set up a fake timeout. But the point is, if you allow these three actions to take place, someone hitting their mouse causes a tech pause, someone extends the tech pause by going to the toilet, and then thirdly, someone accidentally, or maybe not even about the game, talks during the tech pause, but we don't know ourselves what they've said. That from the outside, you could make the conspiratorial argument that allows any top team that has the sway to do this. Because by the way, I'll just throw this out there. I also know too much about the esports industry to know that if you were a tiny shitter no-name team and you tried doing this, you will not be able to get away with it, and you will not get that pause, and you will be told, like, guess what, get the puff back here now, get in the game and start the game. Like, you can only do this if you're a superstar team and you have a little bit of CS royalty vibes about you. It's a classic thing in Counter-Strike back in the day. The big teams, if they go to the small land, could always abuse the admins and get away with shit and push the envelope a little bit. That was just part of the nature of the game, a bit like how in sports the star player gets more calls from the referee and gets away with more. We all get that. But my problem is, you are opening the door if you don't punish anyone, or at least take a public stance that you acknowledge this, for someone just doing this. And the difference is, this was a group stage game. But imagine if someone did this in like a really big semi-final. Here's one for you. How about one that has VRS implications, that we need to win this match to get into stage 3 of the major or something? And someone
that's what happened for Falcons. If Falcons wouldn't have won that game, they potentially would have been.
Yes, it was big for them. And so as a result, the problem I have is this. I'll give you an analogy, and if anyone watches UFC, they'll immediately know what I mean. There's a real problem in the UFC where they have a rule, right, that unsurprisingly you're not allowed to even accidentally poke someone in their eye. Because when you poke someone's eye, they don't just hurt for the moment, they can actually get injuries that might mean they might not be able to see out that eye for the rest of the fight. And obviously it would ruin the fight if while you're fighting, people are just poking you in the fucking eye. That'll actually decide certain fights. So what they do is, right, in theory, if you poke someone in the eye, the rule book says you're supposed to get a whole point taken away from you on the scorecard, which actually will probably make you lose that round or affect if you win the fight, right? The problem is, Pimp, they don't do it. What they tend to do is, the first time you do it, they go, that was an accident, I won't take the point. If you keep doing it, then they might take the point. The problem there becomes, you can see where this is going, because by the way, one of the best MMA fighters ever, John Jones, did do this a lot. He essentially used to abuse this rule, and in any big fight, not necessarily because he's losing even, he can just get an advantage by getting one free poke in your eye at any moment. And that is actually like, you can see how if someone really great used it, they wouldn't just open a loophole, mate. They could abuse it completely, and already they're better, but they get extra edge on top of that. So I don't want it to ever be that, even though in isolation, smashing your mouse, totally human thing. If you really did coincidentally happen to, I don't know, have diarrhea, yeah, you're going to have to literally leave. You haven't got a diaper on, you have to leave the fucking venue. I understand it. That's each incident in isolation. Even the third one, Pimp, even if it turns out all they were doing was thinking, well, we're waiting for him to come back. Hey, like, after the game, should we get Korean barbecue? Even if it's something as simple as that, the problem is you add the three together and then you add in the uncertainty. You can see how it could be abused, unfortunately. And sadly, let's just say I know some people in Counter-Strike, not necessarily FURIA, but maybe, who I think might abuse something like that if they thought it was worth it to win the tournament or win a match or come back into a game where you've run out of timeouts. Because as I say, the other reason I have a problem with this issue is, if it was already the case that we don't mind when you talk anyway, and we already allowed coaches to talk and you as many timeouts, then fine. But we've essentially rationed timeouts in the game. Like, you can't just get a free one. It's a big deal when people take a timeout, or if you make someone burn a timeout, that's a massive deal in Counter-Strike. Then also, I have an issue with the admin angle, because here's the problem, Pip. We comment on it, but the reason I wanted to comment on it is Blast haven't. Blast just pretended it was just a silly little issue, like a mouse and a guy getting up. They've never addressed the fallen issue, because I can tell you, when Yanko said on Twitter this thing about the timeout, basically an admin from Blast came and replied and basically said, I'll just read it out, they said, tech pause was initiated to fix the mouse. K. Serato had an emergency, was granted permission to leave the stage with an admin escort. Talking on stage was only with admins to fix the tech issues. Here's the problem. Yanko immediately followed up with a clip from the broadcast, which, as I said, the timing of the camera was crazy. The camera was exactly where you'd want to catch them if they were talking. And it just, sorry, they're not talking to the admin, they're talking to each other. Fallen's talking to two other people down the line. And I noticed when Yanko linked linked that clip and said, this is talking admins, there was no follow-up message by the admin from Blast. Magically, they went radio silence. They didn't address it anymore. I think they just knew, like, there's nothing I can say to that. He sort of got me on that. Here's why I have a problem, Pimp. Because my issue is this. I just said before, we technically can't know what Fallen was saying. But Blast can. They can go and listen to the comms. They're recorded. They've got the TeamSpeak, etc. They could go and listen and see, was Fallen saying Korean barbecue later, which is still a violation, but it's not as bad? Or was he literally saying something like, hey, drop back on the beginning of that? Because if he's doing that, I'm sorry, that should be a punishment. You pick what it is. I don't know, maybe you lose your ban for the next match. Maybe you lose some prize money for it in this game. Whatever it might be, I think you have to take a public stance because you have to send the message to everyone else. This not only isn't okay, but don't, if you're a big team, think you can sort of like elbow you into the loophole and get away with it in the way we wouldn't let fucking Foot do it if they were at the LAN, And then lastly, I'll just throw this out there. I won't do a whole thing here because I'll probably do a separate video on my channel. But I would have a lot more sympathy also if specifically Fallen in his teams over the years hadn't done this before. Like, I've given an example of when I worked at E-League. I think it was E-League Season 2. Would it be Season 2? Yeah, I think it was E-League Season 2. Fallen actually did the same thing. There was a tech pause during E-League, and I was backstage watching all of this on like the monitor or whatever, and I just noticed, bro, he's just talking to the other guy on his team. Like, they're just talking the whole time. And so I actually this is why I know tournaments organisers don't do anything, Pimp. I had to go to E-League and be an absolute prick to them and be like, you better do it. I said to them literally, by the way, it's just kind of insane, but I'm one of the only people who'll do this shit. I said to them essentially, if you don't say something, I'm just going to go on Twitter right now and say you're allowing him to cheat. Like, I said, this is against your rule book. It's not even just that, like, we're debating. You've got him on camera, bro. Again, your camera happened to be showing him talking, and I can tell he's talking to his team. He's not talking to an admin. So in this scenario, if you don't issue, at least say something on broadcast that we saw him doing it, we'll at least get a warning. I said, I'm going to go out myself and just say you're letting people cheat in the tournaments. So I kind of held them hostage a little bit there. But at least they did it. Secondly, I'll just throw this out there. Many moons ago, I think it was IM kind of 2016, I'm Thorin, this is what I do. He also, when they actually used to have in the ESL rulebook that you couldn't do pixel boosts, he did a pixel boost on the banana at B on Inferno. He did it. He just did it during the match, and because it was literally like a final or a semi-final Pimp, they just let him get away with it. They didn't do anything again. Here's my problem. It's not even that you have to punish. At least acknowledge that you know it's a violation, or at least give the verbal warning. That's the minimum. Like I said, even in the UFC where you poke the guy in his eye, they at least tell you, don't do that again, or you'll get put. That's the minimum I expect. I would actually just like a punishment, because as you say, in this scenario, you could actually have fucked over Falcons' major run just because you might, look, it's not even that info probably winning the match, but that could have given you a tiny edge, though. That could have been the tweak. Think about when Blade does a timeout, we're all like, what a genius. What if Fallen said the right thing in that timeout moment there that got him a little bit of extra time and they did something? No one wants to live in that world. I think that world would suck to live in, especially because we made these harsh rules about timeouts. We're making them valuable.
Yeah, I think I agree on that point. It's the uncertainty of what's being said, and could it have had an impact or could it not? I think if there's the question, if you can ask the question, could that have been a difference maker, or could that have had an impact on the game? Then again, we're questioning the competitive integrity of the game, and I very much agree that question should never, in an ideal world, that question should never be able to be even asked, and if a situation like this one occurs where it can be asked, then I also agree, maybe there should be a public stance on it. I'll be completely transparent, out of all the things that I care about in Counter-Strike, and I try to understand, from a more objective and nuanced perspective, admin's work in Counter-Strike is one of the few areas I have fuck all clue about. I honestly don't know how they work internally. I don't know what the rules are. I don't know what or how an admin is approached for a game or selected for a game, or if certain admins are behind certain teams, yada, yada, yada. I have literally no clue. I sense, from working behind the scenes that the level of the admins and how they prepare, and what kind of rule books they have internally and how they approach it is a lot more professional nowadays than it were 2, 3, 5 years ago, for the exact same reason you're mentioning right here. There has been issues beforehand, where teams got away with cheating or certain things could be questioned, and as we go along, we learn, and as they learn, they get more strict and they get better at dealing it. I could also, without knowing, imagine, as I understand it, there's only one admin behind each team, right? So you have an issue with a YEKINDAR that is slamming him out. An admin goes over to YEKINDAR, and if Kazerado by himself decides to run to the toilet, then do you have a secondary admin to go with him? Or how does that, like, I have no clue if there's two admins attached to each team, and if they can even handle a scenario where one player decides to leave by himself or whatever that may be. So in terms of commenting on the specific case right here, I honestly wouldn't know what's fair, what's not, but I just want to summarize to the point that you made in the last phrase right here, is that if you can question Because I agree, if you can question the competitive integrity of a moment like that, then at the very least, it'll be nice to know if as you said, go in and listen to the team speak. Did he talk about Korean barbecue, or did he give tactical feedback to any of the players, or was it just like, this is a tough game, huh? And then if that's the case, then give him a warning, and tell people we gave him a warning. This is what happened, etc., etc. So in that regard, I agree that could be done. Then again, I don't know if Blast have done that and felt like, okay, so that's what happened. There's no need to push the agenda further or stick more gasoline to the fire, so to speak. Or if they haven't, I have no clue, not involved in that department. But at the end of the day, I think the way I want to summarize it is in two things I take away from that. If there is a question about competitive integrities, the question needs to be answered. We shouldn't be able to ask that question in the first place. Second of all, the only thing that I, personally could get a little bit annoyed by it is it's Fallen, right? And he's a high prolific player. And I would hate to have the idea that he gets away with it, but not a smaller team, as you said as well, or not a smaller personality.
Yes.
And I think it's not Fallen's fault that sort of he's a high prolific player, but at the end of the day, he's the one talking, right? So he has to take responsibility for that. I would love it to be absolute certain that it's the same rules everyone obeys by, whether you are a new upcoming in-game player or whether you are a storied Legendary Fallen who's been around for a long time. And again, if I can ask that question, I would like it to be addressed in some sense, that I would really appreciate if I had the certainty that there wouldn't be any difference in the treatment, both from admins, obviously, but also from the community perspective in whether it's Fallen or someone new. Because again, I don't know how the admins are working, so I don't really want to comment too much about that, but I can see at the community that obviously he gets away with it, and he would get away with it, from a prolific standpoint compared to had it been someone that the community dislikes, or someone they don't respect in the same sense, and that I have a problem with, I think in competitive environment like that, when you're on a server, when you're in-game, I don't care if you're Fallen or if you're some new guy, if you are an in-game leader from Russia I've never heard about, like the same rules applies to everyone in that regard, whether that's from an admin standpoint or from a community standpoint as well. And the only thing I've been able to see now, again, it wasn't really paid to my attention, but just looking at some of the community feedback and some of the comments, you do get a sense, that it's Fallen, so he gets away with it way, way more easy than someone else would have. And that I don't appreciate, to be honest.
Also, I'll just say this. I have an obvious bias, and I said I've seen him do this multiple times over the years, and he's never got away with it, felt like every time. So I also will say, I have no doubt there will be other top pro teams who've done this. Now, maybe they didn't get as unlucky that the cameras on them when they were talking, so it's hard to say. But if anyone ever sees this happen with another high-profile team, message on Twitter, and if I see the message, I'll call them out too. And by the way, I don't care if this is my fit. This is one thing people don't realise about rules. Listen, it's a very Anglo thing, but I think rules are really important. Like, I actually do think if you establish rules, everyone must abide by them, because that's what maintains the competitive playing field. So I don't care if this is my, whoever people think I'm biased towards, I don't know, fucking Donk or Monacy or something, I don't care who it is. If they do this, I will not only call it out, I will also call it cheating, because I'm sorry, I do think it is cheating. That's also why, even if Fallen was saying Korean barbecue, bro, one, you have a track record, and two, you're Fallen, you're like 39,000 years old, like, you're not 18, it's your first lad. And the joke is, I would actually be more forgiving the foot, they're barely being your fucking lads. Some of them probably never even went to a land that had this rule. If you're Fallen, you've been to 1 million big events that had this rule. You definitely know this is the rule. Even if it slipped your mind, I can give you less sort of like fucking leeway. I can't just let you off for it. So I would call out any pro who did this, by the way. It's actually one area that I'm very unique in. Like, I people on that laws. It's actually the whole, as a quick aside, the whole reason why Nico has never fucked with Thorin isn't anything like you think, Pip. It's not that I'd said anything crazy on broadcast. I never like just it. What really happened was there was a clip really early in Nico Sports days where Nico, I don't know if people remember this, did a movement in like an online game where he claimed his mouse just died, and because he has super low sense, it looked like he just locked onto a guy through just two doors and strafed perfectly locked onto them when they happened to strafe as well. So at the time, I didn't even say it was cheating. I just on Twitter put, what the fuck is this? Because it looked like a crazy aim lock at the era, by the way, where we'd just gotten out of all the flush and shit and shocks either. And I was thinking, just a brand new super incredible player's come along and he's got a mad aim lock clip. So because I just was like, what the fuck? I tell you what, he got super. So I'm telling you, I will call out even the people I like if I think it's cheating, because I think cheating should never be allowed, no matter who it is. I don't care if you're the nicest guy, the best guy. By the way, I even think to some degree it's worse if you're actually the best guy and you do it. Again, the little guy cheating, I get it. They're fucking nobody. The game's everything to them. So anyway, I think that's enough of that. Now, here's the thing. It might be bullshit if you think that FURIA is cheating, or maybe you think they're getting more than they deserve in the game when that's not the way. But you know what? You also can feel like you're cheating. marketing into the aim out of their wonderful t-shirts and products. I'm actually wearing one right now. This is a brand new one they just sent me with kind of like a cool, is this some sort of like Japanese type design?
Yeah.
It's fucking baller, doesn't it? This is one of their print shirts. By the way, the material is also a really nice blend that's like both stretchy, but also keeps the softness after time. And you can save loads on Into the Aim, because if you use intotheaim.com/LFN, you automatically get 10% off anyway, but it then actually stacks. So our code applies to everything else on their website. So if you go and buy a bundle, like 3 print shirts, like $62, 3 plain ones that are really nice quality, is like 52 or something, the intotheaim.com/LFN will get you 10% off that as well. And they currently have a sale on where some items, I believe it's from, let me just check the date, it's from March the 25th to the 31st, so the rest of this week in a couple of days, they have up to 60% off on items, and then if you use this code you get 10% as well. So if one item was 60% off, you'd actually get 70% off. I can tell you, I've got loads of the AM shirts. They're also the ones I wear when I'm like chilling at the end of the night. I take all the other stuff on and I want to just lounge, so I think they're really good. Shout out Into the AM. Obviously go to theam.com/LFN, get 10% and check out their up to 60% sale. Okay, right, now we did that. How about we actually talk about what FURIA does in the server, Pimp? Because even though it's becoming like a fucking, we're like the stock market tracker for FURIA on this, like, sure, it's sell. I told you to sell. I've got to say, Pimp, it keeps going down and down and down. Like, as much as there's, by the way, the scene is such a mess outside of Vitality. The joke is, FURIA could still come into some of these finals. They could still be deep in a lot of these tournaments. They're still a good team. But if you look, man, they do. They're just not the team they were last season, mate. That team, I'm sorry, that's come and gone. I've never seen them like that. Their flaws are more apparent. What do you think of FURIA at the moment? What's going on?
I think exactly what we discussed in the very first episode of the year, where personally I got a lot of flack for saying it, is happening right now. You're seeing individual players. They hit the mark in 2025. Yuri played a fantastic year of Counter-Strike, especially the later part of it. Same for YEKINDAR, same for Keserado, same for Fallen, all of them. Every single player, almost apart from Keserado, have taken a dive in form. You know, basically we're lacking like 2-3% from all the players, and I would say Yuri in particular is the one that stands out.
His numbers are way lower, mate.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a downfall for Yuri, so to speak, and he's playing again, as we discussed. You know, when we talk about Heavy Guard in G2, we talk about Bit in Navi. He's playing the role that when he's playing well and the rest of the team plays well, his impact is very, very high. But if the rest of the team doesn't play well and he plays well, it doesn't really affect the team too much. That's just the lottery of being in those, you know, anchor positions and playing CT sides mostly by yourself, being stuck in Pit on Inferno, etc., etc. So when he's not performing well, in particular the CT sides, you know, around his area are struggling, and their T sides so far as well, in particular at Blast as well, were just not looking great. You know, it was very atypical for FURIA. I pointed it out a few times with Wu, and we found a couple of examples, especially YEKINDAR in this tournament. You know, the guy you can always count on almost over-peaking or over-moving, you know, always all over the place, you know, takes liability and takes the freedom to sometimes go for play where you're like, from the outside, you're observing and thinking, okay, he's either mad genius or he's mad, you know. It's one of the two. He was very stale, you know. He was very almost like defensive in his own standards, not really going for a lot of initiative, playing without confidence, not going for the same amount of duels that he used to, etc., etc. And I think the general calling from Fallen as well, where it was clear to me that either he doesn't have the same tools to work with anymore in terms of MongolZ, you know, having a couple of rounds where he opens it up, or Yuri finding impact like he used to do. As I said, YEKINDAR, arguably the most important player on that T side in terms of creating space, didn't do what he normally does. So do I want to critique Fallen for not calling great T-sides, or is it more so his tools are not, you know, working the same way they used to, and he has to figure out why that is? Up for debate. But overall, the sense I got from FURIA was, you know, some of the other tournaments, they were like, yeah, they're lacking 2, 3, maybe 4%. This time around, it felt like they were lacking 5 to 10. Like you were not even close playing your best brand of Counter-Strike. They were struggling against teams they shouldn't be struggling against, losing maps against teams they shouldn't be losing maps against Falcons as well. In that game, you go up 9-3 on Nuke, switch to the T side, and you get 0 rounds, or did I get 1 round maybe? You know, they threw a 9-3 lead and lost 13-10, I think, or 13-11 or whatever. It was atypical. It was like a way of losing that I haven't seen before. I would almost attest it to lack of individual, you know, showing up in certain moments, speak about you, speak about MongolZ. But this time around, it's also tactical from a macro perspective, where YEKINDAR didn't do the plays he normally does. He seemed like he was out of confidence. He also did speak about him being potentially sick during the tournament. So again, maybe that's part of the reason in this isolation. But when you look at it from the year so far, it's been it's been a little bit lackluster. And I'll tell you what, you may not give a lot for the Valve ranking, but currently they're ranked 6th in the world. And I don't think that's unfair. I think FURIA right now have dropped from being the second best team in the world, where there was really no discussion about it, to now they're in the same field of team as Mouse and Spirit and, Falcons for that matter, Paravision. And it's not like we're happy about what Mouse are doing. It's not like we're excited about what Spirit is doing either, but they're in the same field of teams right now. So if you're a FURIA fan and if you're a Fallen fanboy, you have to admit right now that 2026 has been a little bit disappointing. And one thing is having 1 or 2 tournaments where you don't go all the way, but we're talking Pro League, and yeah, sure, the caveat that Fallen knew he couldn't play the playoff. Did it play in? Did it not? I don't know. Online? I don't know. Is an excuse? I wouldn't really say so. You don't make the playoff. You don't make the playoff at Blast Rotterdam either. 2 tournaments in a row where arguably, or what's supposed to be the second best team in the world is not making the playoff. I don't care what the circumstances are. That's not good enough. So now we're looking at FURIA as a team that is potentially entering the mid portion of this first season, heading into Cologne as well in a bit of a crisis. And I'm curious to see how they're going to solve it.
They've also just lost to a lot of teams. Remember, in that second season, even when Na'Vi beat them in the major, I was like, that was Na'Vi playing up. That was Na'Vi going epic, and they choked a little bit. Na'Vi was still like a borderline elite team. Bro, they've lost to so many. Like, first of all, you can't say it's fine to lose to Falcons if you're all going to go, fail clowns, the shittest team ever, the Sonics are front. Well, then why are they beating FURIA again? Supposed to be like a contender for best in the world. Then how about you lose to Aurora? Yeah, people make fun of Aurora and think they're like chokers and not good enough. Then they lost at fucking, Clues and Poker to MongolZ. MongolZ doesn't even have Senzo anymore, boys. Like, look, we'll praise them later in this episode, maybe. But again, I agree with you. FURIA on paper, especially with this weak top 2 to 5, is supposed to be the obvious one for number 2. I don't even need the repeat vitality, but you should be in all the finals and the semis. Like, the idea you're not's crazy. And then, the problem now is this. The Pro League one, which notice they messaged before the Pro League group stage even ended, like, there won't be a fall in the playoffs, basically. Which is basically saying, look, we know we're not going to win the tournament. That'd be fine as Copium if that was the one tournament where you lost to the bad teams. You're losing these same matches elsewhere, and absolutely Fallen will be in the playoffs here. So that's not even how it would have worked if you'd have made it here. So you have just dropped off. Like this, I don't think the excuse is valid, especially because, as you say, it's not even just like a weird thing. You look at the numbers; they've dropped off for a bunch of players, and then actually, if you look as well, here's another really big red flag, bro. In their map pool, here are the maps that are dropped off that have made them weaker. Before, they were really good on Overpass. They were mega on that map. They've just dropped on that. And then also, in the middle of their map pool used to be Nuke, which everyone plays. So they used to also have these 2 maps where they'd often win those 2 maps against. So nowadays, they've become almost average on these maps. Like, they don't have the same, they don't even have a go-to map that they're definite to win. That was something they did have last season. They were dangerous. So I feel like in every sense, they've slightly degraded a bit. And then also, just throw this out there, there's a reason why every time they get an interview, they keep doing the hook. Mate, Fallen will probably retire. So that's a killer. If we really believe we're going to win the major, why are we saying that all the time? That almost sounds like he's preparing us. He's soft selling us that, like, when they don't win the major, Pimp, he then gets the mic and does the Dupree. Like, that's the end of my career, guys. Thank you so much, everyone. If you like, I don't want to see that. I actually want to believe that the fear from last season is real and they can contend with vitality.
Yeah. Then again, retiring in Cologne, that's a great scene to do. I agree with you. Yeah, it would be mega. I think it's actually worse than people say this, and I think the reason is as much as we work with recency bias, I also think there's a lot of goodwill for the top teams in Counter-Strike, because obviously when you think back to 2025 or the last 3 months of it, they were the best team in the world, some may argue, and they were the favorites heading into the major in a lot of people's mind, and myself included. So fair enough for putting that up. It's only 4 months ago, by the way. So I think they're still living off a bit of the goodwill, but I'm looking at the results right now, and I think in Cluj, I was trying to make the case, Ken, who remember who the desk was with, maybe Richard and one of my co-analysts, maybe was it Yanko or Mario. I was trying to make the case that I think actually FURIA right now are starting to look weak, or weaker, despite them still winning games at that point, that they're looking a bit weaker. I'm a little bit worried on behalf of that, and I was instantly shut down, calm down, group stage games, they're getting the win, they ramp up during the tournaments, yada, 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 because they didn't look great in, was it Krakow either, in the group stage.
By the way, that's aged poorly since there'll be no playoff now, Pimp.
Exactly, yeah. Well, fair enough. But if you look at the last 2 tournaments, because you said it yourself, right, they lost a game to Bait. You don't lose a game to Bait if you're FURIA. They lost to 3D Max. You do not lose a game to 3D Max if you're FURIA. You don't lose a map to Heroic playing still with their stand-in or with their rifling AWP player if you see them as stand-in anymore in Youngstar. I don't know. You don't do that if you're FURIA. And then you lost to Astralis. You most definitely don't do that if you're FURIA. You lose to Aurora, as you described as well. I'll be completely honest. I think Aurora is sort of like the gatekeeper right now for top 8, top 10. They're not a great team. They're not a bad team. They're just there. You don't lose to them if you're FURIA, and especially not on LAN in a studio environment. And then almost the most significant, dare I say, loss or game for me in this tournament was when they won against NRG. They did lose a map, however. They lost Mirage to NRG, a team who came into the tournament with Grim being signed a week ago. Them saying that we put Grim in all the positions that we want to put him in on most of the maps, but we haven't had more than 2 days of practice. So we can't wait for this tournament to be over so we can have a European bootcamp and start practicing with Grim. We're talking NRG, right? A team that should, for them to even be at the tournament and have the chance to play at Blast Water them, great for them, did a good job, got a win, good for them. But FURIA should never even lose a map to them, and not in the fashion they did lose Mirage. So I'd even say one of the weakest games they played at Blast was actually against NRG, where they won. So in that regard, I am very, very scared on behalf of FURIA, because when I just mentioned all those results, 2 losses in Bait and 3D Max, you drop maps to Heroic, you lose to Astralis, you drop a map to NRG, who's haven't had any practice whatsoever. If you look in isolation at the last 2 tournaments, and then sure, you can say, well, Pro League was online, the new Fallen was not going to be there, blah, 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 blah. You can always find one angle or one excuse for that. If you're supposed to be the second best team in the world, if you're supposed to be the first contender to Vitality, so they don't run away with IEM Cologne and the major as was it nothing, as was it a walk in the park. If you're supposed to be the second best team in the world, you do not lose to those teams first and foremost. And if you do, it's a one-off. Like, you can afford to lose to Bait, but then you bounce back, you beat 3D Max, you beat Astralis, you go into the playoff, you'll play fine with a standing regardless. You do not have that many lackluster results in a row if you're supposed to be the second best team in the world. There's no excuse for that. So I think the problems within FURIA probably is a little bit more troublesome than people want to give it credit for right now, because they're still living off a bit of the goodwill, and it is a likable team, so to speak. But I'll be honest, when I look at that and when I look at the last 3 tournaments, I'm not convinced that FURIA is just going to bounce back like this. I think it's going to take a bit more than that, and as I said, I'm curious to see how they're going to do that. If that means, positional changes, if that means, a couple of tournaments where they're still ramping up and getting ready for Cologne, or if that means that we're looking at another team like Mouse, who potentially is entering a bit of a playing crisis leading up to IEM Cologne. We don't know, but that's the way it's trending right now.
Yeah, I've got to say as well, I looked this up while you were talking, because I was thinking the same thing. One of the problems I have with FURIA is, look, I didn't expect them to be this bad. If you remember on that episode where we argued earlier, I still thought they would be like a lock to be top 4, top 6 at the whole time. Like, at worst, you'd be a playoff team every time. I never imagined they'd fail at playoffs. But here's one thing that it does, unfortunately, tie to even when they were really good. Even when they were really good, I always pointed this out, they very rarely blew people away. They were winning a lot of close games. They were winning OT games and epic matches where they'd do clutches, and then MongolZ would get impact kills, and YEKINDAR would run the T side. They were doing some epic shit. Right, here's one of the reasons I am worried for them in general. It's not just that they're losing, it's the way they're losing and winning. Like, I looked it up. In theory, on LAN this year, they've played 17 series. I'm not best of 3. I'm not counting that one final against Vitality, because obviously this won't apply to this. So 17 LAN BO3s they've played. In those 17 ones, only 3 times have they ever 2-0'd someone. Otherwise, they're always 3. And by the way, listen to the 3 teams they 2-0'd. Bait, Aurora, Tai Lu. Bro, the only one there that's even good's Aurora. What? And then they themselves have been 2-0'd a bunch of times. Something like 3 or 4 times. Like, that means every match is a struggle for these. I mean, as you said about the NRG one, yeah, look, NRG barely won a close game, then they blew them away elsewhere. Why are you even losing maps to NRG? If I look at those rosters, you would never believe you could ever even get in a game as NRG. Like, as you said, NRG's happy to be there, mate. FURIA's supposed to believe they're going to win this fucking tournament. I mean, I'll tell you the obvious angle people are missing on FURIA is, at the moment, it's fine because Vitality wins every tournament. What if, like the last tournament, we have a scenario where there's no Vitality? I mean, at this point in time, by the way, look, they obviously didn't make the playoffs, so this is the case anyway. But actually, here's how bad it is for FURIA. Even if they were on the other side of the bracket and someone else, let's say Na'Vi or Falcons, did them a favour and beat Vitality for them in like the quarters, you can't even trust that FURIA will go in the final and win the tournament. Like, that's why I'm with you. Like, it's not just that, like, everyone's levels drop, Vitality's too good. They've also had a serious flaw. And at the moment, it's not being fixed. If anything, it's actually festering. It's getting a little bit worse, or they're just staying down in the dumps a little bit. And I think it's only the fact that positions 2 to 5 are so all over the place tournament. That's hiding it a little bit, because we all spend our time hating on Mouse and FaZe and Liquid and fucking... We never get to FURIA. But that's the joke is, and I'll say it on this other show, and I'll say it here. Here's where, if you're FURIA, you have to admit it's over, the idea you're going to be the number 1 team, is you're so close right now to beyond even rankings in actually looking in the server like Paravision is better than you. I'll just remind people, That Paravision lineup, I give mad props to Jim for that. Because, bro, 3 of his players, I looked this up today, 3 of his players aren't even averaging a 1.0 rating, and he's doing the things he's doing. Bro, Fallen, you have K. Serato, who's still peak. MongolZ's still pretty good. YEKINDAR every now and then. Like we said about Yuri, he wasn't even supposed to put those numbers up. That's fine for him to just be... You have more than enough talent here to get wins and be better than Paravision. So, bearing in mind, it is JMRGL doing that. Show me it then, Fallen. Show me you're a legendary RGL. You've got the pieces, mate. You've got better pieces than him. Let's see it, because I'm with you. I think they're in trouble right now, mate. Like, actually, it's going to be worse than I thought at the beginning. At the moment, they're tracking that if they went to the major, they'd be like a coin flip to even make the playoffs. They might just come like 9th or something, you know.
Yeah, that's the issue. I think that's a fair sentiment. I think that's a fair statement. You know, they have dropped down to rank 6 in VRS, and, you know, by the results that we discussed and the teams they're losing to, like 3D Max, you know, a team that realistically, you know, a good tournament, they'll be in stage 3, but it's not a playoff. It's not a playoff contender. Losing to Bait, it's not a playoff contender. Losing a map to Energy. I think there's enough, you know, evidence that it's not looking great right now for FURIA, and it's not like they have a lot of tournaments to turn it around as well.
No.
I was just looking it up, right? They go to IM Rio, and then they have Blast Rivals, PGL Astana, then into the major, right? So 3 events leading into the major as of right now, by the looks of it, and it's. I think, you know, I just looked up the stats as well for the players the last 3. Yuri is lower rated than Fallen. Like, Fallen with a rifle has a higher rating than Yuri the last 3 months with the top 30 opponents online. Like, that's a massive drop off for Yuri. That's not supposed to happen, especially in a time where, as you also described it, I think they are lucky in the sense that MongolZ are struggling even more so than they are to some degree. FaZe is obviously fucking around and taking a lot of attention right now in regards to that. Spirit is not working out so far with Magix as an in-game leader, despite Dunk doing everything he can to make sure that's not an issue. But there's other teams right now where they kind of share the burden of being not great, you know, or trending downwards or not closing the gap to Vitality. So had it been, you know, a time, as you said, where MongolZ were doing well, Spirit were doing well, are showing progress, where, I don't know, you know, some of the other teams around them, Falcons, would start to go into finals again, etc., then all the attention would be on FURIA. They've been the biggest drop-off almost, you know, and I'm almost willing to argue that them and MongolZ are kind of equal in having been the most disappointing team in 2026. And I think by a lot of people's, you know, obsession with MongolZ and the general state of likeliness for that team would say that MongolZ have been a bigger disappointment than FURIA in this season. But I think when you look at it factually, when you look at the results, I think there's a case to be made for both. I think both could be contending for that title when you look at the top dogs. So I think it's worse than people are imagining it is right now, and that's based on the goodwill I was talking about before.
Yeah,
they were great in late 25. They're a likable team. Fallen is a likable guy, but the cynic in me is
they even play a great brand of CS, bro. It's enjoyable to watch.
Enjoyable to watch, fun to watch. I love watching MongolZ. I love watching YEKINDAR, despite, you know, not always agreeing with the way he's approaching the game. But I think if I'm completely cynical in this regard, I think they've been maybe the biggest disappointment of 2026 so far. And I don't think a lot of people would be willing to say that because they're too likable. You know?
Yes. Now then, on this show, obviously, whether it pays or not, it does. We actually do get money from the show. We just like to be right. We like to be right for the sake of being right and to battle all the plebs and all the people who say the things that are wrong. Well, do you know what? You can also join us by enjoying being right at Prize Picks, because obviously there's all sorts of sporting action on. There's loads of like tournament hoops going on. If you're in America, by the way, can I play Prize Picks, you ask? It's available in 50 states, so the answer is probably. And now's the time to get in on the action, because if you use our code counter via the Prize Picks app, then you will get, after you play your first $5 lineup, $50 in lineups for free. You just get to have more value for your buck in this sense. And as well as it's just fun to be right, you get to cash in if you are right. It's really easy. Basically, in whatever sport you pick, they have loads of stats predictions for the players. You pick the player that you're interested in. It'll say, so there's no American football now, but if there'd been American football, it'd have like a quarterback, will he get this many touchdowns? All it is it gives you a stats projection, and then you just pick more or less. You say either we'll get more or we'll get less than that. So in this case, if it's basketball, maybe you pick a player for 3-pointers. If there's a player that gets triple doubles, you pick it for assists. You can also stack if you want the same player in multiple categories. You can do that all. It's really simple. It's really fast to do it. As I say, all you have to do is download the Prize Picks app and use code COUNTER today to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code COUNTER to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. They also have some interesting features, like they have social features. You can share what you're doing as your lineups. You can actually even track people who you've seen be successful with lineups and copy what they're picking, etc., and just click that and it'll be what you pick. So it's got all sorts of features and have fun, play against friends, etc. Check it out. Okay. right? Actually, since this episode has been critical, it's been harsh, there's actually one of those rare moments, Pimp, where we get to show we do love Counter-Strike. So I'll tell you what, if we talk about the team, the Mongols, bro, I know they haven't won a tournament, but this is some salute to fucking Mara and to Blitz, standing ovation for 9-10. Mate, the other day I saw Mazzinho carry the fucking series. Yeah. This is nuts. I really genuinely thought, Pimp, I thought about even making a video, I just didn't do it at the time. The second I heard Senzu was going on the bench, and at the time it was implied no one knows if he ever comes back, I wanted to make a video that's the end of the Mongols. Because who gives a fuck? That was not only their best player, but if you notice, he was one of those entry attempt opening guy. He was still engine of the team, and you watched him, and it was when he stopped choking on land that they became really good, and they were in finals, they're winning EWC. They looked really good. First of all, they haven't even replaced him, Pimp. The controllers guy wasn't Senzu. This Cobra Zero guy isn't Senzu. Senzu was a cut above, but somehow even without him, they're not that much worse, Pimp. I'm amazed. I was looking this up. They have so many upsets and scalps this year. It is crazy. They're genuinely beating most of the top 10 at this point in time. I don't know how they're doing it. So where the fuck is this squad at? Where are we at on Mongols, bro?
Yeah, they're mad impressive. They're mad impressive. I'm inclined to agree with you that losing Senzo make me think that this could be a team that will then fade into just being a top 8 team or just being a top 10 team. I was never worried on them being competitive, but I was definitely worried of them being another G2 team. Maybe part of the playoff, maybe not. In that regard. But I think if you just look at the results so far this year, they've been as impressive as anything they could have done with Sensu. I don't think the Mongols were ever going to be the best team in the world with Sensu. They were never going to be the first contender to Vitality, despite having been in a major grand final against Vitality. But on a consistent basis for, let's say, a period of 6 months, it was hard to imagine them being, better than FURIA, better than Falcons, better than those kind of teams, But they were up there. They were in that conversation. They won EWC. They were in the major final. They did some cool results with Sensu, and I thought that is not going to be possible at all to get anywhere near with the new lineup, neither with controllers or with Cobra Zero. So I've been baffled. I've been very, very surprised by how well they're playing, and I think Blast Rotterdam is arguably the best that team has played ever since Sensu. Not only from a result perspective, but also from the eye test, because in the games they played during the Blast Rotterdam tournament, they were fucking great. You beat Mousesports 2-0. You smashed them. You dominate them on their own map pick, 13-3, beat them 2-0. That's sick. Then you beat, was it Spirit 2-0 in the lower bracket game, going into the playoff? You beat, who else was it? You beat Liquid 2-0. Sure thing, Liquid maybe struggling a little bit, but Liquid also showed some decent Counter-Strike. And then you have a 2-0 loss against Vitality, where one of the maps went into overtime, where arguably you should have won that had you not let Saivu do that's what he does best. So in that regard, I feel like the Mongols are right now, one of the few teams together with Navi. I think those are the only two I would pick trending upwards, and they're trending upwards quite rapidly. They're getting better and better tournament by tournament. Cobra Zero have had a great showing in this tournament as well, statistically speaking. The second highest rated player, only outdone by MCNio, and that was only because MCNio played balls off against Spirit. Otherwise, Cobra Zero would have been the highest rated player for that team for the second event in a row, because he was also the highest rated player for the vast majority of PTL Klusia Poker. So the guy who came in to replace Sensu, that we, in theory, couldn't project whether or not he was going to be any way close to him, has been the highest performer over the course of two events. So if that's the level we get from Cobra Zero, then we can start to have a conversation again about the Mongols, instead of being a team that is just on the cusp of making the playoff. Well, maybe they'll be more of a stable, part of the playoff, and potentially a team that can snatch a trophy, just like Navi did at Pro League at some of the tournaments they attend where Vitality is not at, or where some of the other teams are not hitting the peaks. And do you credit it to Techno? Do you credit it to Blitz in that regard? Do you credit it to the core of the team, or do you credit it to Mara, who wasn't even in Blast Rotterdam? There were a chair behind them with a Mara picture on it. So in that regard, I'm not quite sure. I just think it's sort of like the same storylines that we were honing on about last year, where a very small community, a very small country with a very limited player pool keeps finding players that is good enough to keep them relevant, not only in top 10 Counter-Strike, but seemingly now as a team that can go deep into the playoff at big tournaments. Again, they're facing Aurora in the quarterfinal at Blast Rotterdam. With the way the Mongols are played, with the way Aurora have been playing as of late, I think the Mongols are firm favorites in that game. And I don't think I ever would say the word that Mongols are firm favorites in a quarterfinal at a stacked event where 9 out of the 10 best teams in the world participated. But that is the case right now. So all the credit in the world to the Mongols. Is it a bit of a honeymoon phase? Is what Mcino did against Spirit, is that going to be anywhere near the level that he's going to play on normally? Like, he's having a great tournament, obviously, but it's been a while since we've seen Mcino, show progress in his output on the server. Is Cobra Zero, who's still relatively new, is he going to stay at that level? Like, is he going to be a stable 1.15 rating on average at the big top tier events? If that's the case, then I can bank on the Mongols, and then I have a lot of faith in Mara, but unlike, some other community figures that share the same job as me, I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what's going on. I don't speak Mongolian. I have no clue about, whatever they do, however they work, what kind of the cultural, mental approach they have to the game. So it's very hard for me from the outside to judge him really. But based on results and based on what they're doing, I'm mad impressed by them right now. And I will say they are, unlike FURIA and MongolZ, who are arguably the two most disappointing teams of 2026, I think it goes without saying that together with Paravision, I would put the MongolZ and maybe Na'Vi in that category as the most improved and interesting storylines of 2026.
As I was with you, like when I've watched their games, because it's not like a Zenzu type person going crazy. I'll give credit to 910. I do think he's got a bit better, like as sort of spaces open up in the team. But I've got some stats for you that'll just show you how crazy it is that they're doing this. So first of all, I'll just frame it to people that they're not even getting like crazy fragging and stuff. So listen to these two stats. In terms of team rating against top 20 teams, they're 12th in team rating. They're just a 1.0 as a team. That's nothing. Like, that's not even like some fragging team. Then, in terms of T-side round win percentage against top 20, they're 15th. Right? That means, if you think about it, that they're getting it all off like team play and comms and shit like that, because this is the stat that's a banger. Util damage, they're mega, mate. On T side, they're third in util damage, and on CT, they're fifth. Like, that means actually, this is why I'm saying I think Mara gets credit for some of this. Like, Blitz gets credit. This implies to me, especially because it isn't the same player. It's not like Controllers is there, and he was here the whole time, and he's finally bedded it. No, like, you've even changed him out, bro. He was just there temporarily. You brought another guy who's playing a bit better, but it's like the team just keeps winning. So this implies to me, like, whatever work they're putting in, looks like they're doing a fucking great job. Like, these all look like deserved wins. Like, these don't look like flukes. Like, fair play. And I said the track records, I even looked it up, right? Since they went from Senzu, since with the Controllers lineup too, they've beaten the old Spirit, the one that was with fucking Chopper. They beat G2 last year as well. They've beaten, I think this is this year, they've beaten Na'Vi this year on land. They've beaten FURIA this year on land. They've beaten Mouse. Now they're just beating the other Spirit. Like, bro, that is nuts. Like, if I look at those wins and I took the nameplates off, I'd assume I'm talking about like a top 4 team in the world. Like, that, you must be really good. If I put the nameplate back on, this is why I agree with you, Pim. I'm going to do a deep dive on this team because I have no idea how they're winning. There's so many times when I do my betting, I'm like, lol, who's pumping up MongolZ off here? I'm definitely betting the other team. And I tell you what, I've lost all those fucking games because on paper, they're the other team's the big name. They're not supposed to be MongolZ winning. But again, a fluke is when you do something and then the next 10 times it doesn't happen. They're doing this every tournament. They're getting one massive upset at least, if not a couple. And as you said, mate, we're counting the wins. They've had a bunch of games against like even the best teams where they were in the game when they had no business. Think about Vitality's blown everyone else off the server, mate. How are you even in the maps against them? But they also, even in their losses, nearly always have one map that's like OT or full regulation rounds. Like whatever it is they're doing, Pip, we don't need to know it. We can just credit it. Whatever it is, fucking working, mate.
100%. It's mad impressive, and it's. I remember my big take on the MongolZ during Cluj and Poker was that we had to calibrate our expectations for the lineup. I don't think it was fair by anyone to expect them to be now a top 5 team anymore. I think we kind of had to take a back seat and see, okay, how is this team going to develop? But at the end of the day, I guess I have to recalibrate my expectations now for the MongolZ, because with what they've shown so far in 26 and what they've shown so far with Cobra Zero at Cluj and Poker at this tournament as well, I have to recalibrate and say, okay, that's a team that I expect to go into the playoff every single tournament they play at, because they're playing damn good Counter-Strike. And sort of like the fear I had in terms of lack of firepower, losing Sentu, and in terms of is Cobra Zero good enough? Obviously, we don't know. He was still new, and now he's starting to give us some of those answers, right? So we can keep recalibrating, but it's calibrated to a point where, okay, they're back on track. They're back to a team that, as I said, what's to stop them from snatching a trophy where Vitality is not at the tournament? But that's another point I just quickly want to make here, and that's not to take anything away from the MongolZ, because as I said, arguably the most impressive team of 2026 together with Paravision. They are also doing this in a period where what's supposed to be the other good teams are just all finding a way to
that's fair.
Mess up at the same time. FURIA entering a bit of a mini crisis right now. MongolZ for the first time in a year looking like a team that is potentially, going different ways and can't really figure it out. Those are two of the teams that you'd say, okay, MongolZ should be beneath them, but given the current state of the game, I'd even put MongolZ next to them, or even better. Spirit haven't figured out how to use magics. Falcons, Falcons, the roller coaster, right? It goes up, it goes down. We don't really know where to put them. So for the teams that you'd say these are definitely supposed to be better than the Mongols, are all four at the same time having issues. One would argue that had it only been one of them or two of them, then the Mongols' wins that they would have had throughout this year would have been slightly less impressive. They would still have been great. They still would be in those games, I'm sure. But you'd maybe say that they would lose, if they played Spirit twice, they'd go 1-1. Or if they play Falcons, twice, they'd go 1-1. Or if they play Navi twice, they'd go 1-1. Whereas right now it feels like they're basically beating anyone but Vitality in a sense. So I think they are a little bit gifted by the fact that four of the teams that we expect to be the four best teams in the world outside of Vitality are all having the issues at the same time. And again, it's not to take anything away from the Mongols, because that's exactly when you want to pounce. That's exactly when you want to establish yourself and gain some confidence and put yourself in VS positions that not only gets you invites to all the tournament, but also gives you good seeding. So you get off to a good start at every single tournament. So instead of having to play Vitality in the first round of every single tournament, maybe you're the one who gets to draw Aurora, or you're the ones who get to draw NRG when they're at a tournament, etc., etc. So they're kind of doing good for themselves in a lot of different ways right now. And as I said, I'm curious to see the Mongols at another tournament where Vitality is not showing up. One could only imagine what would have happened in Cluj if Vitality wasn't at that tournament. Same could be said for some of the upcoming ones where Vitality are sitting out. So yeah, I'm super intrigued by the Mongols in that regard.
Another thing as well about this team is, one, anytime, I think the same thing with Paravision, anytime someone wins without anything close to big fragging, what I actually love about that is that's the one area I think most people agree CS2 is a bit skewed. It does feel like a firepower game. Whenever teams do this, I get those vibes of the teams I enjoyed in CSGO. I always used to tell people, Heroic didn't really have that crazy numbers, but they were a fucking fun team to watch at the end of CSGO, or ENCE. These teams had just enough firepower that they could make the game work, and they could play off what we love about Counter-Strike: tactics, positioning, fucking following each other up, making a great call. You didn't need one player to be the super carry and kill everyone, which they don't have in this team. And then similarly, I said it already about FURIA. Listen, I value what Paravision does, but I do think their style's a bit whack. Anytime James does the triple stack on B on Inferno and the other team goes A, spoiler, I know they're going to be saving that round. The ops never go into the other side. It wouldn't, so yeah, that is a little bit boring. Mongols aren't like that. Mongols are in that Fury camp. It's I enjoy watching this team play. They play an up-tempo Brandon CS. They fucking commit. And here's the funny thing, Pimp. If you sat me down with these players, I'd have to go, how are you doing this? The other players are way better than you. They haven't got that memo. They just think this is they think they can play these fucking teams, and it turns out they're right so far. At least at the moment, they're right.
Yeah. I think a bit of what goes, if you want to dive into it, I think they're a bit underrated in terms of actually the individual output on the server. I think everyone, when you listen to other teams speak about the Mongols, I think they're always being described as that's a team where all 5 members are shooting hard. Okay. I think, sometimes when we talk about individuals, having big numbers, sure, the Mongols don't have that hardcore fragger, or they don't have those numbers that is popping off. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have some of the best aim in the game. That maybe just means that some of the tactical distribution or some of the way that certain players are over peaking or maybe peaking a little bit too much, doesn't get the rating that their aims actually justifies. Because I think what I sense from speaking to some of the other teams and what I said from interviews, everyone agrees that the Mongols are one of the teams that just shoot the hardest in the game. They may not play the best brand of Counter-Strike in terms of tactical depth. They may not have the biggest map pool. They may not have the biggest variation in how they approach games as well. Certain teams, I feel like Vitality is a great example. They can win games in different ways. They can play a hyper-aggressive game where they take away map control from their position on the CT side all the time, or they can play back, and just defend bomb sites as a general concept. They can win in different styles, where I think Mongols potentially only have one, maybe 1.5 ways of winning their games, and it all requires them to shoot hard. But that doesn't mean that one player stands out and gets 30 kills every single game. That just means that all 5 players needs to have a great aim, because they're often being left on an island by themselves, where they have to have good aim in order to get 1 kill. You think of a guy who's playing A on Mirage as an example. In order to just get 1 kill or maybe get a double kill when someone is executing on you, that requires mad skill, but you're never going to be in a position where you get a triple kill or a quadruple kill every single round. That's almost impossible in that position. So I think a little bit of the rating gets lost in that regard. So they've always been a team that just shoots hard, and I think that's also when they came around, where people said, okay, in the beginning when they started to emerge, you're just a great group of aimers. You don't really have the tactical finesse for the game, and that's what they've been impressive the past 2 years, because I think Mara deserves a lot of credit. I think the Mongols deserve a lot of credit. They kind of adopted the European way of playing Counter-Strike while still staying through to the Asian way of being in your face, taking a lot of duels, being strong aimers. So I think it's a team that's managed to combine the two, and they're getting the absolute most out of it right now.